Those of you who are watching the replay, please know that these special workshops are given to our mailing list to sign up for first. And if you want to join our mailing list, our wildly popular art newsletter, you can go to schoolofatelierarts.com. And at the banner at the top, you can join our newsletter there. I am so excited to see so many people here. It's insane how many people signed up for this workshop today. So I am so thrilled that you're here. And I can't wait to tell you all about composition and teach you everything I know. We have people from Thailand, from Scotland, from Texas, from Minnesota, Montreal. A special thank you to our Canadians who are willing to come to an American event at this point in time. Much love to you. Okay, so we are going today to talk about composition, and composition is so important. Composition matters whether you're a sculptor or a painter or if you're a drafts person, right? But it also really, really matters visually everywhere. It matters how you arrange your furniture, what color you paint your house, how you arrange your favorite collection of knickknacks, right? It doesn't matter what it is. Composition is about the big ideas. And a lot of times people think being a great artist, a great painter, a great designer, a great interior artist is all about the little itty bitty details. But the truth is, and the old masters knew this, that is about the big, big ideas. And that's what we're going to learn about today. What are the big ideas that have been discovered by humanity and painstakingly handed down from generation to generation of artists for hundreds and hundreds of years? And how can we practice those skills? How can we learn those skills? And what are we even looking for out there, right? Like, how do you even get better at composition, right? These are all the questions that we want to ask and all the questions that I want to answer for all of you today. Oh my goodness, we have people from Oman here today, from Australia, from Canada, from Germany, from Georgia. I really like alliteration. I like saying Germany next to Georgia. Okay, so today I want to introduce you to a little bit of Atelier training concepts. If you aren't familiar with Atelier training, don't worry about it. I'm going to describe it later in this presentation today. I'm going to tell you all about it. But it's essentially the way that artists were trained in the Western sphere until about 100 years ago when it fell out of favor. But when we rediscover these techniques, we can understand that it wasn't just one artist that used these techniques or discovered or invented these techniques. It's a conglomeration of many discoveries by many artists that were kind of collected together and handed down and passed down from generation to generation of artists. Oh my goodness. We have, people from all over the world, and a special thanks to those of you where it's in the middle of the night or very early in the morning. I know some of our Australian and New Zealand friends wrote me earlier about this being a 7 p.m. New York time-based workshop. So kudos to you for caring so much about your training and your knowledge, and to being here today and dedicating yourselves to a really, really early morning or really, really late night, depending on how you want to think about it. Okay, so I am just want to jump in and get started here. We have so much to cover, so we got to get in it. So welcome everybody. I always encourage everybody learning Atelier training, learning art skills at the highest level. It's not for the faint of heart, right? We need focus. So, turn off your TikTok, turn off distractions. If you have kids in the house, see if you can shut the door or something, right? Get your tea or coffee. I like to cuddle with things when I teach and when I learn. Turn off your notifications on your phone. This requires focus. Like, be serious about your training. If you woke up at 4 a.m. to be here today, you might as well get the most out of this workshop, right? So, set yourself up for success. We have a lot of learning to do today. Okay, there is a workbook to accompany this workshop. Many of you received it when you registered for the workshop, but if you didn't, do not panic. In the handouts chat, if you go to the top where the chat is, you can go to the handouts and you can download it directly there. For those of you watching the replay, you can type in the URL that you see on the screen there, schoolofatelierarts.lpages.co, composition-workbook. Okay. And we will get that to you. You can sign up for that. I believe in active learning. If you are passive and you're just waiting to let composition knowledge wash over you, you're going to get about 10% out of this workshop. If you are active, if you are engaging in the chat, if you're answering the questions, if you're looking at the workbook and thinking about the questions ahead of time, you are going to glean so much more out of this training. I believe in active learning. My background is, I'm a K-12 art teacher. I'm a licensed art teacher. I've been teaching for many years. I have Atelier training. I've been teaching Atelier skills for many years. And I know that being active and engaged in your learning makes a big difference for how much of this information you're going to be able to take with you and apply to your own artwork. Okay. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat. I love the chat. And other than missing a few things when I first started today, being silly, I am usually really spot on the chat. I love hearing from you. If you're asking a question that I know I'm going to be answering later in the workshop, I might not address it right away. But if there is anything that you ask that you aren't sure about, that you want clarity on, I promise, at least by the very end of the workshop today, I promise to answer it. And please don't hesitate to ask multiple times in the chat if for any reason I'm unable to see your question. We do have many, many, many people here today. And so if the chat goes too fast, excuse me, and I miss you, please don't be shy about asking again. Okay, and of course you can follow the School of Atelier Arts on Pinterest, Facebook, and Instagram. And also we've started a very active YouTube channel at School of Atelier Arts. I just released a full free class on painting the sphere. It just finished last week. So please check out our School of Atelier Arts YouTube channel as well. And hi, so many of you may know me. Let me know in the chat if you've experienced Mandy crazy before, but I might be new to some of you. So my name is Mandy Tice. I'm a classically trained painter. I'm an Atelier trained artist. I'm also a licensed art teacher. And I believe that the most creative students that we have in this world are the ones with the techniques that they need to create the art that's in their head and their heart without compromise. So I believe technique is the secret sauce of making great art, because I want my students to always be able to make the artwork exactly the way that they intended it without compromise. And, maybe they don't always need this technique or that technique, but they'll never not be able to create the artwork that they intend because they don't have the skill set to do it. So I'm a very skill-based educator. That is my philosophy. If you are looking for a lot of, kind of, do what you feel stuff, I am the wrong person for you. I am a technician. I believe in teaching techniques and skills, and I want everybody to have the broadest skill set possible that I can give them. Okay, so composition, right? Does this sound like you? Do you start setting things up to paint or draw or sculpt or even your furniture in your house, and then you kind of get stuck? You're like, this or this, and there's no clarity. Like, you don't know what to do with the things that you have. Like, maybe you're setting up a still life and the objects, you're just kind of like, here, right? Like, throw them up there, right? Has that ever happened to you? And I am seeing, yes, definitely that this is happening to some of us here. Okay, so we're going to fix this problem. We're going to show you ideas that you can start with, big composition ideas so that you don't have to get stuck. We're going to cover that today. Okay, what about you? Do you have all of these objects and you're not sure if they go together, right? Like, does this belong with this? How do you know? How are you going to decide what goes together or what doesn't go together? Who here has that friend with just a really good eye that is like, oh, honey, no, not that, or yes, that, that's the thing, right? So some people have kind of developed this outside of the painting world, and some people develop it within the painting world. But if you've ever wanted that, it's not some magic thing that someone got bopped on the head with the talent fairy. It's that they learned it somewhere. And so today, you're very lucky. You're going to get to learn it from me today. I'm very excited to share this with you. Okay, and then also there's so much information floating around there. If you type in composition training or composition skills into the interwebs, right, you're going to get all sorts of things. Some from people who know what they're talking about, some from people who don't know what they're talking about, some from like extremists that are like it has to be the rule of thirds or else it's wrong. Some people like, the, golden rectangle or the armatures, of the rectangle, or you don't know what you're talking about. But I am not teaching you dogma today. What I hope to give you today are big overriding concepts that you can apply in ways that matter to you and that are relevant to the artwork that you're trying to create. So I'm not here to say you have to do it this way or you're wrong. That's not what you're getting today. What you are going to get is a series of ideas, of big ideas about how to compose, and then you can choose which ones to pick from the next time you sit down to make a painting or drawing or sculpture or rearranging your furniture or whatever it is that you intend to do with this visual literacy that I hope to instill within you today. And I see some people in the chat like, I have the eye. I'm that friend. That's amazing. That's amazing. So for those of you who already have that skill somewhat developed, I hope to further hone it for you today. Okay, so into composition we go. And again, I'm still seeing people saying hello in the chat, like from all over the place. I'm so impressed with those of you, especially who stayed up very late. Thank you for being here. Okay, so what's coming up? We're going to talk about big composition ideas, right? That's what I've been yapping about for the last few minutes. Like, okay, Mandy, you said you're going to give us big composition ideas. When's it coming? It's coming very soon. We're going to get to it very shortly here. I'm also going to talk to you about big color composition ideas. So a lot of times people think of composition as objects and their relation to each other, but we don't often think about the color of the things that we're putting in our subjects, right? And so I've made this a separate category only because it's so neglected that I felt it deserved its own category. So today I am going to spend just as much time talking about big color concepts as I am talking about these big ideas that I keep harping on. And okay, there's a great question in the chat. For those of you who are here live, yay, welcome. There will be a recording that you can rewatch at your leisure. So if you registered through the newsletter or through the link that I had sent out, you will automatically be sent a recording. And I will also be adding this to the YouTube channel once it's complete. So there'll be multiple options. Again, our YouTube channel is School of Atelier Arts. If you type that into YouTube, you'll find us. And I will make sure to put this recording there for you. I work with a lot of art teachers and artists all over the world, all over the country. And I try to make sure that our resources are reusable, especially for the art teachers out there in the world, right? I want to make sure that you can, leave this as a sub-lesson plan one day, for example, right? And for those of you who, might be like, oh, wow, I've never thought about it this way, or those types of learners that might be here today that need to see things a few times and let it wash over them, this recording will be available for you on our YouTube channel. Okay, and then I'm also going to teach you how to practice the skills, right? So it's one thing to be like, oh, this is a composition concept and this is a composition concept, but it doesn't mean crap if you don't know how to practice it and if you don't see opportunities for practicing it, and most importantly, if you don't actually do the work. Right? So I can tell you everything there is to know about composition, but if you never set up compositions applying each of these concepts, you're never really going to know them. So my challenge for all of you today, and again, go see the recording of this after it's done, watch it multiple times, is, okay, well, here's some concepts and how are you going to practice them? Right. And so I hope that you set up still lifes or whatever your thing is, sculpture, still life, drawing, design, wallpaper making, whatever it is. I want you to practice each of these concepts. See if you can create an example of each of the things that I'm going to talk to you about today. Okay, so practice, I mean, that's the educator in me, right? Like to really know it, you're only in the zone of cognitive development. You're only kind of knowing something until you apply it. Okay, and as a bonus today, I'm going to share with you our newest resource that the School of Atelier Arts just put out there on how to practice all of these concepts I'm going to be teaching you today. And so I'm going to share this at the end, and it might be just what you're looking for to help you, kind of underscore what we talk about today and practice the skills that we are going to learn today. And also, just for the webinar people, okay, so if you purchase during this webinar, you're going to get 10 bonus color theory worksheets. So the color theory worksheets were the last worksheets that the School of Atelier Arts released. And because I am emphasizing that color is also design, I included this as a bonus. If you purchase these worksheets today during the workshop, during this webinar, because it's so important. Color is so neglected when it comes to design, but it's truly integral. Like, you can't have great design without great color. And if you have not yet mastered your value chroma hue control, then these worksheets are going to really help you do that. And don't worry if those words I just said don't mean anything to you yet. I promise they will by the end of this workshop. Okay, so why is composition so hard when the old masters make it look easy, right? It seems like every painting we see in a museum is like, oh, that's pretty. Oh, that's pretty. I mean, maybe it's just me and I'm a little schizophrenic in the museum, but here's a little confession of mine. I have never been to a museum and not got yelled at by a guard, because my nose is like right up in these paintings all the time. I get yelled at constantly. But aside from that, I'm not saying to make the guards angry at a museum. You shouldn't do that unless you really care about the art and you need to see it up close. In which case I'm not advocating. I'm just saying that you can get yelled at a lot and not actually get kicked out of the museum, just so you know. Okay, anyways. So why is it hard when they make it easy? Oh, I see lots of other people in the chat saying, yes, I have been yelled at too. Who are my people? And I don't care if you're even watching the recording. Let me know in the chat, like, who are my fellow get yelled at people at the museums. It's always a comfort to know that I'm not the only insane person in museums. That's like, art is meant to be looked at. And if you're trying to study these techniques, sometimes you need to be closer than the 4-foot rope lets you be. Oh, yes. I see lots of people in the chat being like, yes, this is me. I get yelled at by guards. I feel like maybe I should start a Facebook group called I Get Yelled At by Art Museum Guards. That'll be my next Facebook group. Oh, man. Okay, so why is composition so hard when the masters make it look easy? Well, they have information that is not broadly available today. It's actually not that hard. They did not get bopped on the head by a talent fairy. They had access to information that is largely lost today. Okay, so I've been there. I've been like super aggravated. I went to art school. I got my teaching license in art education. And somehow along the way, nobody ever taught me about composition. And I was just trying to make it up. And then my students would ask me how to make their paintings better. And I'd be like, try this. I don't know. Right? Like, how could you teach something that you don't know? Right? And yet students, and I found this to be consistent, is that they have these ideas in their head and they want to get them out as they see them up here. And they get very, very frustrated when there's a disconnect between what they're thinking about and what their final artwork looks like. And then they come to you, the art teacher or the artist that they respect or look up to, and they're like, why? But I didn't have these answers, right? I did not have these answers until I went to Atelier training. So this is an example of what my compositions used to look like before Atelier training. And I mean, if you're into repetition, I guess they're fine, like donut, 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 cupcake, 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 right? But they certainly weren't sophisticated, and they certainly didn't look anything like those paintings we just saw from the old masters. So what happened was then I discovered that this thing called Atelier training exists. So for those of you who might be unfamiliar, atelier is just a fancy word. It's a French word that means studio, right? That's all it means. And it's basically this type of training that the old masters had that really went out of favor this last century. And because it was so despised for the last century, it was nearly lost, especially, Westerners had very minimal access to this. In part because it was considered communist realism, for a good chunk of the last century, right? So, ooh, you want to work in realism, communist, that was considered a problem. So there were only a handful of places that maintained this knowledge, that had been collected over centuries and painstakingly handed down from artist to artist. And I was lucky enough to discover one of these places, and I left the education profession. I went back to waitressing. I briefly slept in my car and I got atelier training. And the crazy thing is when I was doing this, it was the, early 2000s, right? But now there are so many amazing resources online. You are actually training with an Atelier trained artist right now online. That's crazy. The School of Atelier Arts has a full online atelier that you can attend. That's crazy. These are like, it's never been more accessible in our modern era than it has been right now. Okay, so now my compositions look a little different. I even hung this painting. Oh, sorry, this is in reverse. I'm a classically trained painter and I don't know my left from right. Okay, so I even hung it on the wall behind me, on my carpet wall here. So I had this, for those of you who are painters and you're working in your studio and you're tired of putting like tons of holes in your wall, I basically installed some, I forget what they call it, that sheet board wood from, the home repair store, and I covered it in carpet and I had it installed on my wall. And now I can hammer holes all over my wall and remove them, and there's no holes in my wall. So pro tip, carpet walls where it's at. I'm a big fan. Yeah, and there's a lot of great chatter in the chat here about ateliers, about the history of ateliers, art schools closing, but ateliers gaining steam. It's always a pendulum, right? Like ateliers were nearly exterminated, and now they're making this massive comeback. And ironically, atelier training has become the countercultural movement to art. Maybe sometimes people feel like a banana duct taped to a wall is not something that they relate to, but that a rock, paper, scissors painting is something that they can relate to. It reminds them of their childhood or whatever. It can be interpreted without having somebody telling them what it is. It takes out the middleman, right? If you have this really abstracted, to me, all right, I wasn't going to go into this, but I'm going to go into this. To me, art communicates visually, right? And if you have to explain through words what your art is about, it might be philosophy with an illustration, but it's not art. Art communicates visually. So if you fail to communicate your intended message to an audience, then to me, you have failed at art. That's my personal opinion. A little stringent in our contemporary time. I've been accused of, being a crazy conservative person wanting to take art back 100 years, but I just really believe that we shouldn't have to have middlemen in art to tell us what things mean, that we should be able to use our eyes and enjoy communication visually. Oh, and thank you in the chat. I'm glad that other people enjoy this painting. I feel like painting should give people joy, right? And so I spend a lot of time thinking about what can I paint that would uplift people? What would bring people joy? And to me, that's the point of my art. And thank you. I'm glad that you find it satisfying. Okay, so we have so much to talk about today, and I would definitely want to get to the composition, the nitty gritty. Like, let's get into it already. All right. Okay, so the old masters used big ideas to compose. Okay, let's talk about what big ideas are and how we can use them to compose. And it's true. I see in the chat that many artists want to learn what ateliers teach. Yeah, I worked in K-12 education, and I still work on and off in K-12 education. And, I feel like every kid felt that they could be a painter and an artist. And it wasn't until there was that disconnect between what they intended to do and what their art started looking like, usually around second grade, that they kind of diverged into two groups. The group that happened to have access to better knowledge outside of the public schools, and the group that's like, oh, if I can't paint like Rembrandt already, that I guess I'm not a painter, right? But anybody can paint at the technical level of Rembrandt that had the training Rembrandt had. Rembrandt went to an atelier. Leonardo da Vinci did not wake up just painting the Mona Lisa one day. He trained in an atelier for more than 10 years. In fact, his atelier instructor kicked him out because he was like, you're too good to just be stuck in this atelier. You need to go out there, on your own, move, right? So, we think that because of the lack of training that exists today, we think that these people were just bopped on the head, but they were not. They had access to all the knowledge that came before them. And what I hope for all of you is to give you some of the knowledge that came before you, right? That's what I hope for in all of my teaching, and especially in this workshop today. All right, so big pictorial movements. There's so many ways to describe a pictorial movement. I've picked a few out here to discuss. So you can have diagonals, repetitions, spots, sweeps, spirals, all of these things. But here's the thing, I can say that, and it's just an abstract concept until you experience it, until you see it, right? So that's what I really try to do with the resources that the School of Atelier Arts presents, with these worksheets, that we just released on composition, is, okay, well, here's this very abstract concept, but what does it mean? And so in these worksheets, I actually cover hundreds of paintings from various artists, from various backgrounds that use that particular concept, so that you can practice seeing it and you can practice identifying it. Okay, so in this particular example, do you see how heavily diagonal? And you can say that the big idea is diagonals, and you can also say that the big idea is repetition, right? Because it's not just one diagonal, it's like slash, 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 right? This is the Baroque era painting, and this type of diagonal is very popular as a way of organizing a picture plane during this time period, right? Another fun fact about this time period that I just love is that the Baroque artists loved what's called the sinister diagonal. So instead of having their light shine from right to left, left to right, they often had their light shining the opposite way. And you can see that in this particular example, that in the background, the right side of the canvas is brighter than the left side, whereas in almost all classically trained paintings, it's reverse. And they call that the sinister lighting or the sinister diagonal, because sinister was shorthand for left, and that meant coming from the left. So fun fact. And I mean, part of me is just kind of a little bit of a rebel. So I love using the sinister diagonal in my own work. It's one of my favorite compositional techniques. Okay. And then sometimes the big idea is something somewhat unexpected. Does anybody have an idea? And I encourage everybody to type in the chat. Like, it's better to type and be wrong. You'll learn more than to be like, oh, I think it's this. And then no matter what I say, be like, oh yeah, I thought that, right? When you type in the chat, you're committing, right? So even if you're watching this replay, type it in the chat, right? Because you're committing to an idea. So what could possibly be the big compositional concept in this particular painting? Does anybody have any ideas? Be brave, my friends. Be very brave. You can do it. I tell my students in the online Atelier painting bootcamp all the time, like, people think that painting is about, moving your brush in a certain way or having a certain color on your palette. But more than anything else, it's about bravery, right? You have to expand your vision. You have to expand your ideas of what's possible. You have to be incredibly humble to learn. Okay, and I am seeing so many great answers in the chat, and I'm so proud of each and every one of you for actually putting yourself out there and putting it in the chat, because you're going to learn more than everybody else. Okay, I see so many good examples. All right, so you could argue that there are several important design concepts in here, but there's one that's very dominant, and that is this S curve here. Okay, this is the biggest idea in this painting. Now, I also saw some people say horizontals, and that's true. There are some very strong horizontals going on in this painting. So you could say that. I was just interviewing an artist earlier today on a different YouTube channel. And he was saying that every painting is a stage, right? And you have your main character, and you have your chorus, and you have your backdrop, right? So in this case, the S curve is our main character. And these horizontals are secondary. They're kind of like our chorus, kind of supporting up our main character, right? And then of course we have this kind of backdrop, this kind of almost cloudy sky, not being that important, but just kind of supporting the main role here. um, okay, so we have the big idea, right? And there are infinite big ideas. I want to be very clear that even though I'm introducing a set amount of big ideas, that there are infinite. There are more big ideas being discovered all the time. And it doesn't really matter which big idea you organize your compositions around. The importance is that you have a big idea in your head, okay? If you just go in and be like, oh, there's a person, I'm going to paint the person, and I'm going to put them over here on my canvas to the left or over to the right. I'm not sure if you guys can see my mouse or not, so please let me know in the chat. This is a new technology that I'm using today, clearly, because I had difficulties at the beginning, and my apologies to you guys for that. But if you aren't purposeful, your very first two lines that you put on any canvas set the proportion and the design for the entire freaking painting. Okay. But how many of us are like, oh, there's a person there, without thinking about how big or how small you want that person on the canvas, how far left or right on the canvas you want them, right? So we have to be intentional with our big ideas. We should have a clear vision in our head of what a painting is going to be before we ever put those first brush strokes down on canvas. Okay, so can anybody tell me what the big idea is here? It's a little trickier. And again, there can be a major player, minor player. You could make an argument that there's two major players in this particular canvas, but the idea was there before the first brushstroke was laid down. All right, so I'm seeing some guesses starting to pop up in the chat. Please don't be shy. Like, the way to learn is to put yourself out there, especially if you have aspirations to Atelier training. Practice your bravery every chance you get. I don't know anybody who made it through Atelier training without crying outside the studio for a time or two. And I don't want to discourage anybody, only that, sometimes when you really want something in your heart and your handiwork, it falls short of your visions and your dreams, that can be a hardship, right? And so what I try to do with the School of Atelier Arts is to always lay out a clear path of what the next step is, right? I want my students to always feel encouraged to know that even if they mess up this step, that it's part of a process, they can just go back one step and that they'll be able to move forward. I don't want anybody in my classes to ever feel that they just don't have it, because that's a bunch of BS. That's not a real thing. That doesn't exist. The it is access to knowledge that other people don't have. And in Atelier training, that's what you get. Okay, so I see symmetry, I see repetition, I see rule of thirds. You could make an argument for many of these things, but I am going to describe this a little differently than maybe some of you have heard before. I am going to call this spots. Okay. Sometimes instead of having a line or an S curve, how we saw in the previous example, that S curve kind of connecting everything, instead we see kind of spots that pop out. In this case, the artist is using contrast against the background as kind of a dance. All right. And sometimes, like, this is like two big spots, right? Sometimes you'll just see kind of a glittering across a canvas, right? And I covered that extensively in the worksheets that I'm going to talk to you about at the end of this workshop today. There are many worksheets just on identifying spots in lots of old masterworks so that you know how to apply it in your own piece. So it's not that it isn't symmetrical. There is some symmetry here. It's not that it isn't repetition. It is repetition. But the important thing here is the contrast of how light against those background. And you could say that the sheep themselves are spots. And you could also say the heads of the sheep. Sorry, I have a slight speech impediment where I can't tell the difference between SH and CH. And I have to talk about SHEEP right now. And I'm going to mispronounce them. So apologies. So the sheep if I put my fingers here, then I can say it the right way. The sheep heads are also creating spots against their bodies, right? So it's kind of almost like a bullseye effect of spot on spot. And that's why I have used spots to describe this particular painting. Okay, you guys are crushing it. Okay, so at the beginning, I said that the most neglected aspect of composition is color, and now I want to talk about why that is and how we can really think about color in our compositions and how other artists are designing entire compositions around a color, not a diagonal, not an S curve, not a spot, but a freaking color, right? If you have ever looked at a painting and asked what color it is, look at the painting behind. Sorry, it's in reverse. The painting behind me, right? If you had to describe it in what color would you say it was? Because it does have a strong color overtone. And, sometimes paintings have multiple things going on, right? So we have a big sweep here, right? And we have some strong verticals going on. We have some strong diagonals going on, with these blades of the scissors and this paper here. But we also have a strong color concept going on. So if you had to say a color, what would you say? All right, and I'm seeing some great answers in the chat. Okay, I'm seeing ochre, I'm seeing yellow, I'm seeing tan. And you know what? All of those things are words for yellow, right? Because we're only talking about hue here, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, right? Now, tan is a very neutralized yellow. Ochre is a slightly less neutralized yellow, but it's still a yellow. So if I had to pick one hue, I would say yellow. So I see a lot of people in the chat have picked that up. But, we have cold yellows. This is a cold yellow compared to this more ochre color that's a much warmer yellow, right? But overall, it's kind of a dance in yellow. It's pretty fun to think about an entire painting as just one color. Now, you can also say, okay, so I'm still not sure if you can see my mouse here, but we have yellow on this color wheel, and we have a yellow that leans green, kind of a green yellow, and we also have an orange yellow. And I would say that this painting is overall a true yellow. It has some yellow that leans green. It has some yellow that leans orange. But overall, if I average it all out, it's probably a true yellow. All right. Thank you for the clarity about the mouse. I'll stop squiggling it around being like, do you see? All right. Maybe I'm going to have to find a new presentation because I really like pointing at things. Okay. All right. What about this picture? This is one of my favorite artists, Thomas Wilmer Dewing. He was a painter working in the late 1800s, early 1900s in Detroit. If you had to give this one hue, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and if you want, you can say red, orange, yellow, yellow, green, green, blue. I can't think of all the ones in order without seeing the color wheel. But those are hues, right? So we're only looking at hues. We're not worried about neutrality. We're not saying like a army green, right? We're saying green. So we're not considering neutrality. We're only considering how warm or cool the overall color you think it is. And I see so many good answers in the chat. So I see yellow and yellow green, and I see green, and I would say yellow green is the correct answer here, right? So it's a very cold yellow. And by the way, every color is both warm and cool. Can we just talk about like time out here? Okay, people think that, oh, red, orange, yellow are warm colors and green, blue, purple, are cool colors. And that is a lie. That is a lie invented by somebody, I don't know who, but all color is relative. If you look at her skirt, it is a warmer yellow compared to the more greeny yellow of the wall, right? But if we compared her same skirt to, say, a sunflower, it would look really cold, right? So the only thing that matters with warm and cool is what you're comparing it to. Every color is both warm and cool. The only thing that matters is what you're comparing it to. If I sound like a crazy, insane person to you, we also, the School of Atelier Arts has some color theory worksheets. I encourage you to check those out because it will drill you on warm and cool colors nonstop. There's like more than 50 worksheets on it, okay? So I don't have time to go like a deep dive into color, but if you're curious, if you think I'm insane, I promise those worksheets will prove to you that what I say is true. Okay. All right, so yellow on yellow on yellow, right? And darkened yellow is still a yellow, right? So even though it's like a neutralized darker version of yellow that looks almost green on that floor there, it's still technically a yellow, because if you darken yellow with black, what happens? It turns green, right? Green is a dark yellow. That is also covered in the color theory worksheets if you want more information on that. Okay. So I hope I'm delivering on all my promises so far. I said we were going to talk about big composition ideas. I said we're going to talk about big color ideas because color is composition. And I promised you I would show you how to practice these things. Okay. So I'm hoping that I'm delivering on everything I promised you at the beginning of the workshop here. All right. So how to practice. If you go to a museum and you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to focus on finding the big color idea of every painting I can that has an overriding color idea. Some paintings have every color in them. You're not going to find the big color idea, right? But if you go searching in your mind and you go with the intent of what is the big color, you will find the paintings that are organized around color. Now, some of us might live in the middle of nowhere, right? I used to live in the middle of nowhere, Montana, myself. I used to teach in this tiny, tiny town called Harrison, Montana, right? And there weren't a lot of museums around Harrison, Montana, okay? But so if you don't have access to that, it's okay, because one of the things that I did in this composition worksheet set is put hundreds of examples together from museums and artists all over the world so that you could practice these without having to go to a museum, right? So you can practice this by going into the museum and thinking about spots, or looking at a bunch of historical examples that are designed to help you find the spots. Either way works. All right, but focus on one concept at a time. If you go into a museum and just say, I'm going to look for composition, you're going to miss out on a lot. If you go into a museum or, go through our worksheet set that we just released, that's organized by principle, and you practice one at a time, you will A, learn them better, and B, see them more, right? Instead of being told this is a diagonal, you're going to see a painting and be like, oh, that's organized around a diagonal, right? So you can't just be like, oh, I have this abstract idea of what composition is. You need to actually practice it in order to correctly identify and see the nuance, especially of what a lot of these artists are doing in their own work. And more importantly, how you can arrange your own compositions in an intentional way that speaks to the viewer the way you intend them to speak to the viewer. Sorry, I'm on my high horse. I'm going to try to drop it a level. I'm on my soapbox. I'm going to try to get off my soapbox now. I just feel so passionate about this issue because there's no reason to have bad design. We have access to better information than we have ever had in the history of the world as human beings right now. And yet I would argue that composition by contemporary artists is some of the worst that's existed, at least in the Western tradition, in over 500 years, right? Like, how is this possible? It's because we've forgotten what was already known. People are like, oh, training's going to ruin my creativity, but really, like, why are you spending 10 years discovering for yourself that a diagonal works great in a painting when you could have learned it in 10 minutes, right? Like, why are we reinventing the wheel when we can learn what's already known and then truly innovate beyond it, right? I just don't understand this attitude of, it's going to ruin my creativity. I hate that. I can't stand it, because like, I'm going to choose ignorance and to ignore everything that other people learned before me. Like, what other field would do that, right? I don't understand why it's so prevalent in the arts, but I'm doing everything I can, including creating all this curriculum on color theory, on composition, because I believe that in order to truly innovate, we have to learn what's known and then move beyond it. And yeah, I agree with someone in the chat that's saying it's weirdly anti-knowledge. It is. It's crazy. Okay, so how to practice? I guess I've already said this. Focus on one concept at a time and find as many applications as possible. So this is one of the worksheets from the composition worksheet set that we just released at School of Atelier Arts. And you can see in this particular worksheet, it's focused on diagonals. And it's not just showing you obvious examples, it's showing you less obvious examples, right? So you have the painting on the right there that, he's holding kind of a rifle and it's creating a very strong diagonal. By the way, that painting If you had to pick a color, what color would it be? Because it's also a color painting, right? The figure can align a diagonal. Objects like that corn stalk can align in a diagonal. Sometimes just that bottom middle one is an example of a diagonal just from contrast of the person in the foreground, right? There's no diagonal really when I'm forward, right? But when I'm leaning sideways, look, there's that diagonal, and you see it because of the contrast with the background. All right. So and this is just one page. This says diagonals, what, number 4? Oh, this is number 1 or number 4. I can't tell. It's too small. Sorry. But there's so many of these pages, right? Showing you so many different ways the artists of the past have used this concept, so that you have many different ways in your head the next time you set up your painting or your drawing or your furniture, to consider, it's not just in this obvious way. There's so many nuanced ways that these same concepts are applied. Okay. Okay. And then get feedback. All right. So one thing that was really important when I was designing these worksheets is an answer key, right? What good does it do you if I say find the diagonal if you're not checking your work against what an Atelier trained person knows to be true, right? Because some of these answers are obvious and you'll get them right away. But I also was super, super sneaky. With each worksheet, I tried to challenge you a little bit more. And some of them are going to be harder to find than others. And so the answer key is like having an Atelier trained instructor over your shoulder being like, yes, you got it. High five. Hey, maybe you need to rethink that one. Wasn't quite accurate, right? So getting feedback from somebody who has inherited this knowledge, who knows more than you and can give you this feedback, is just as important. That's what Atelier training is, that other types of art training are not, is that it's not just that you're receiving the knowledge, is that you're receiving checks on how you apply the knowledge, right? That's where real learning comes in. All right. And I see some people have already purchased and haven't even gotten through all of them yet. But the thing is there's 50 worksheets there. There's more than 50 worksheets there to help you learn and practice these skills. Okay. So you want to get better at composition. That's great. You've already taken a great first step. You're in this workshop. You're talking to an Atelier trained person. You might be watching the replay. Congratulations. You're investing in yourself. You're investing in your art and your composition skills. Okay, so option number 1 is to kind of just bumble along, being like, okay, I kind of know these things now. Mandy pointed a few things out. I'll go to a museum and I'll look for colors or whatever. And that's great. That's something, right? That's going to help you. Like, obviously, I'm giving this free workshop because I want more people to have this knowledge. I am desperate to make this knowledge more commonplace so that people stop believing in the magic talent fairy and start understanding that it's a learned skill, right? Can you imagine if your math teacher was like, oh, you don't know how to add already? Or you don't know how to do calculus? I'm not going to teach you how to add, right? That doesn't make any sense, right? But there's so many people who are like, oh, I can't paint like Rembrandt. I can't paint like this painting behind you. Therefore, I'm not going to start or try. And that makes me so sad for the world. Everybody is capable of technical aspects of art. It's no different from learning how to read or learning how to add. But there's this prevalent belief that you either have it or you don't, right? So no matter what, I hope you walk away believing in your ability to learn composition. It's not magic, it's a learned skill. All right. Option number 2 is you can help yourself with resources that are designed to help you, right? So I created these composition worksheets for artists, for art teachers, for those trying to teach others, for those trying to teach themselves, with that answer key, with so many different concepts, right? We barely scratched the surface. We only have 1 hour today. We have barely scratched the surface on composition possibilities. In fact, even when I finished this worksheet set, ever since I finished it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so many more. Like, there's probably going to be part 2 coming out because there's just so much to learn about composition. And one of the easiest ways to do it is through drills, right? And being a K-12 licensed art teacher myself, I'm always looking for ways of, our teachers come to me and they say, Mandy, it's great. I want to learn Atelier training for me, but I could never teach this to my students, right? And so I'm always trying to find ways to make it accessible. And these worksheets, they're great bell ringers, right? They, you can put one worksheet up, on the board a day and just have students practice a little bit every day. If you have, you get sick and you have no sub lessons, guess what? These make great sub lessons. For those of you who are artists, right? Like maybe you do just one section at a time and then set up, your next painting with that concept to practice it. There's so many ways that these worksheets can help you be better at composition. They were designed to help you be better at composition. They were designed to give you the Atelier knowledge that I have inherited from 1,500 years of artistic people and trying to pass on to you. And this is an opportunity to receive it. Okay, so these are the worksheets that can help you master composition. And like I said in the beginning, we're starting with mastering the big ideas. We are learning how to control compositional colors. So this is an example of the color worksheets where I'm asking you to be very specific and applying what color is this thing. And of course, there's the answer key, right? And practice, practice, practice. There's the answer key. So you are both practicing looking and finding and then checking it against an Atelier trained artist that is telling you what they see. Okay. So it's a process for composing that's going to work for you. I know it's going to work for you because it's worked for 1,500 years of other artists, right? So you don't need a talent fairy. What you need is the knowledge. All right, so these worksheets are available this week only. This is our launch week. That's why I'm giving this free workshop today for only $39. And because you are here today investing in yourself, there's an option for a $10 worth of bonus worksheets. So we have a full set of composition worksheets for $50, but these are 10 additional worksheets of the color theory that you can get today just for purchasing the composition worksheets, because color, as we talked about, is such an important part of composition. So it's a great supplement to the worksheets. So when we stop launching this, the regular price is going to be $49 and there's not going to be the bonus color theory worksheets, right? So if you purchase today during this workshop, now you can get both of these things for only $39. That's $10 off the regular price of the worksheets plus a $10 bonus of the color theory worksheets. Okay, so you can purchase these worksheets with what you see on the screen there. And I also have this like nifty little button that will pop it up on your screen. So if you would like to purchase the worksheets, if you click on that button, it'll take you directly to the worksheets. If you already bought the worksheets and you attended here, just send me an email and I will send you the bonus worksheets. Absolutely. You deserve them. Excellent. So I really hope that you will invest in yourself. I really, it's so, we struggle to invest in ourselves as humans, right? We'll invest in everybody else around us. We'll invest in our students. We'll invest in our children. We'll invest in our parents and our siblings, right? But when it comes to the thing that our heart really wants, sometimes we're like, no, later, right? It doesn't have to be later. I tried to, put these worksheets out there at a really accessible price point so that anybody that really wants to learn this can access it, right? And so I'm seeing a question that somebody had bought. We also have a worksheet bundle. So, we have figure drawing worksheets, we have portrait drawing worksheets, we have color theory worksheets. So if you have any questions about which worksheets are in the bundle, send me an email, Mandy at School of Atelier Arts. I'll put it in the chat here. And I'll get you straightened out. Whatever you need, we'll figure it out. And I see someone in the chat, Shirley, saying, I'm so excited to get into the worksheets. My students are working on the portrait drawing worksheets right now. I'm so glad that you're using them and that you're finding them useful. And again, we have many worksheet sets. They're all designed to help you learn the best you can, from an Atelier trained artist, drilling. Sometimes in the Atelier, they throw you in the deep end and they're like, here's 100 things, apply them right now. Right. But as a K-12 teacher going into Atelier training, I'm like, that's crazy. Right. Let's break it down into smaller concepts. Just like I broke these composition worksheets down into smaller concepts, I break the portrait worksheets down, the figure worksheets down, the color worksheets down. So, we really do our best. to, make it accessible. And the one feedback I consistently get about our worksheets have a cult following. People write me nonstop, Mandy, when's the next worksheet coming out? When's the next worksheet coming out, right? They have a cult following because they're so effective at helping people, especially people who are a little afraid that maybe they just don't have it, right? Because you can't fail with them. They are broken down into really small sections, really simple ideas that then build up together to more complicated ideas and eventually lead you to mastery, right? So, I really believe that art is a learned skill that anybody can learn how to draw and paint and compose effectively. And it's really a matter of access to knowledge. And, at the School of Atelier Arts, through our YouTube channel, through our worksheets, through our online Atelier painting bootcamp, which is a more serious level of training. If you're ready for that level of training, shoot me an email, mandy@schoolofatelierarts.com. We have group critiques twice a week. I really, push you like you would be in any regular atelier, but it's an online atelier. We do everything we can at the School of Atelier Arts to provide as many access points to as many people as we can to knowledge, because I don't believe in ignorance. There's no reason that we have to be visually literate as a society. This knowledge exists. It's known throughout most of the history, the last 1,500 years of history in the Western world. And yet we are going around almost blind right now. It's crazy that we have access to more information than ever. And yet somehow this art knowledge is still really obscure, and it doesn't have to be. And you could be one of those few people that have it. Okay, well, I am so excited for everybody being here today. If you have any questions that didn't get answered earlier in the workshop, now is your opportunity to ask it. I am here for you. If you are watching this replay, please leave a message in the chat on the replay, or write to me at Mandy@schoolofatelierarts. That's Mandy with a Y, MANDY, @schoolofatelierarts.com. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being here to learn, to show up for yourself, to discover more about art. It really takes a lot of guts, even to carve out time, as you did today, especially those of you overseas who carved out time in the middle of the night to be here, from Germany and Australia, from Oman, from all these different places. It's really impressive to see how you invest in your art, in your training, and you matter and your art matters. And I hope that you know that, and that you see the value in investing in yourself. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. It was lovely working with all of you. If you enjoy learning with me, please make sure to follow the YouTube channel at School of Atelier Arts, and especially enroll in the newsletter. If you signed up for this workshop, you should be part of our newsletter community now, but all of our best resources come through our newsletter, so you don't want to miss out. It's wildly popular. Okay, thank you, everybody. It's lovely seeing you, and have happy art making. And until next time, happy trails, everybody.